Just kidding. And I am here with Martin Heebie-Jeebie Willis.
Yeah. So I'm the real heebie-jeebie, I guess. Wow.
I guess, and from what you told me earlier, that's a bad thing. So earlier, for the listeners, Martin said, I heard you had the heebie-jeebies. I'm not sure where he heard that. He can let us know. But I told him, no, it was actually the flu, because I don't know that the heebie-jeebies, it's a real thing. Besides you're a real thing.
Well, I think the heebie-jeebies is I thought it was like something, microscopic, like you got the heebie-jeebies, and so came down with the flu.
It could be. There could be some quantum level, the quantum heebie-jeebie that manipulates your cells in your body, creating viruses, just like a little bastard.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah,
wow.
So that could be the whole root of sickness. So if you can, do quantum surgery, because it's fun to use the term quantum and stuff that you don't know what it is, so just say it's quantum,
Yeah, that's
true. Nobody
true.
can prove you otherwise. So
they can't see it, they can't prove it.
Yeah. So you could be onto something. What do I know?
That's right. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Either way, it was cute. It was a cute little heebie-jeebie thing you were doing there.
All right. Who's your guest today?
Hey, great question. My guest today is Cheryl Costa. So,
right.
Yeah,
yep,
she's
from
got
New York.
Yeah, from New York. So she's got a new book out. Of course, we're posting in our headlines one of her stories at least a week, because she writes for the Syracuse New Times about UFOs. So those of you who have been following her postings are aware that she came out with a new book, and it's called The UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2015. That may sound extremely boring, and if you look at the cover, it's black and white. Looks like an old drawing of a UFO, and I'm sure that may appear as boring to some. But to weirdos, UFO data weirdos like me, there's not much more exciting. I mean, so she's going over the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy. Maybe it comes from my background in the corporate world where it's numbers, numbers, numbers. And I like numbers because even in today's world, when I'm doing the website, and just so open minds and the Congress can exist, we've got to follow the numbers and what's going on with all the numbers everywhere. So I love numbers, and I love UFO numbers. So I'm very excited about her book, talking about sightings, all around the United States from 2001 to 2015. What sightings, where, when, that sort of stuff. So,
wow.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like it would take a lot of research to do something like that.
Exactly. And
wait a minute, was that did I just hear a heebie-jeebie call?
Yeah, we didn't even finish our heebie-jeebie conversation, but to talk about it, if that's what we'll be talking about, how long it took her to put together all of this data and some of the exciting data she's found. And there's been a ton of news stories about her book. In particular, it's about California. I don't know. I think we've talked about this. In the headlines, you can find a bunch of stories about her having California at the top of UFO sightings, and we talk about that in detail in our interview here.
Yeah. Well, it is the number one state for sure for sightings.
According to her information.
Yeah, where I had my sighting, too.
Where you had your sighting?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fair. I think some people suspect that Californians are, at least in part, extraterrestrial.
I could, having lived there for a total of about 10 years or so, 9 years one time, 1 year another time, I suspected that all along, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I would much prefer to be around extraterrestrials than, dare I say, I'm going there, than the people in Arizona. There is a large amount of people of a particular political persuasion that is not my own, and I'd rather be with the aliens. But Anyway.
Okay, you went there. Yeah. Okay.
But, so that's what we'll be talking about in just a minute. Before that, I just wanted to say I'm not going to apologize for having the heebie-jeebies, as Martin would put it. But I did have a flu last week, and I was out, and I have not been hit with a flu, a full-on flu, for probably decades. And for a very long time. Now I felt something coming on that was probably the flu in the past. In fact, once a year maybe I feel that way. And I'll usually rest, and usually an evening of resting or maybe even a day of resting gets rid of it. And that's the most I've had it. So I haven't had it full on. But yeah, I got it full on, and it might be that I'm thinking I need to get the shot, because I hear that even if you catch the flu, if you get the flu shot, it's less severe. So, maybe I'm just getting old enough where, the heebie-jeebies are just able to get past my defenses.
That's what it is. They're
my aging defenses.
That's right. They quantumly sneak past.
Oh, that's right. They got that quantum crap. Those little sons of... But luckily I'm back, and we've got a show right when I'm back, so people ought to be happy. So, what can you do? But beyond that, I'm gonna mute when I have to cough here. But I guess let's talk some UFO news.
All right. Well, speaking of California, I think I'm going to talk about this one here, and this was back in I think it was February 9th, 2017, and this is over Eureka, California, which is Humboldt County, which was home of the marijuana growers from way back when. I'm not sure if that's still going on up there.
Is that where
I remember about
That's where you used to get your stuff back there?
Oh, no, I never partaked. I never inhaled. Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right. Yeah.
Because then you're good.
Yeah. So a rectangular-shaped UFO flew over this town, according to this Eureka witness. He heard a loud jet-like sound, and which made him come outside. And he looked up, and he saw this, like a square-type, rectangular UFO with a bunch of lights on it. And he did some sketches. It kind of looks like Swiss cheese or something, but you can see the sketches that he did on the article. And so he couldn't figure out what this thing was, and he thought at first it was like a huge military cargo jet or something, but it just couldn't be, from what he is describing. And he said to his wife, "What is that?" And she looked too, and he told her to go hurry and grab her binoculars, and then this thing, it started speeding up, I guess, and it looked further away. And he says it was very large and square and possibly the shape of a home plate object. I wouldn't really call that square or rectangular. Isn't a home plate like a diamond shape?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking almost maybe, do we dare say, another triangle UFO, perhaps?
Although his pictures are square.
They are. Maybe he doesn't really know what a home plate looks like.
Yeah, it could be that geometry is not his strong suit.
Yeah. Well, I bunked flyology too, so.
I'm sure you did.
Well, anyway, so the lights, he thought they were sort of where the tail of a plane would be. It's not really making sense, his report, totally, because if this thing was square, I don't know why he'd think it would look like a plane or maybe a baseball diamond or whatever. But anyway, he saw something, and he reported it and to MUFON, and we don't have a case number. This was posted by Roger Marsh on your website. Eureka is actually a really beautiful area in California. It's really nice. It's pretty far north of San Francisco, but it's really a beautiful area.
I'm pretty sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Really, I just think, again, I understand why there's a lot of sightings in California, because there's so many days of beautiful blue skies without any clouds. So I get it, why it happens there, all the sightings.
Yeah, and
that's really all I got.
I was going to say that's where the Bigfoots sightings first got popularized, like the
Right.
Betty Hill and Barney Cash of Bigfoot happened in Eureka. Where
Was it?
Yeah, did you know that?
No.
Yeah,
Wow.
so like there was this. I think they were, if I remember correctly, they were lumberjacks, and they were out there, and their stuff was being thrown around, their equipment broken and stuff like that, and they found a print and of what they coined Bigfoot, and they showed the news, and it's a famous picture of the guy holding up the Humboldt County Times, I think the paper is. Wow, I can't believe I can remember all this stuff. And he's holding up the print of the Bigfoot, the cast of the foot, and that made Bigfoot famous. All started
Was this
out
prior to the Patterson?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wow. How about that? I never knew that.
Prior to Patterson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to look that up.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. So, a little bit of Bigfoot history there too. You know what else was really exciting news?
What's that?
Was that the Open Minds, and they don't like it when you call them the Open Minds, but that Open Minds website posted an exclusive video of Fife Symington. Did you watch that?
I did watch that.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I first saw this video of Fife Symington. So I should tell people what it is. Essentially, James Fox is the guy. Well, you guys have heard. You guys heard me interview, hopefully, years ago, James Fox about all of this. But James Fox, the guy who does documentaries, he did I Know What I Saw, and Out of the Blue, some of the best UFO documentaries. Well, when he was doing the Phoenix Lights, he interviewed Fife Symington and some of the Phoenix Lights witnesses. Symington, he then played, the witnesses, or Symington, some audio of one of the witnesses, and Symington said, well, I saw that thing too, and it was huge, and he had a lot of really interesting things to say. Well, we've heard about this, we've seen clips of him saying he saw this, but now you get to see James Fox's entire interview. So you get to see, that's what we posted. James Fox used this video in his lecture at the UFO Congress this last year, and he also provided it to us to post online so people can see the whole thing. And so you see it starts off with Symington listening to the witnesses and James Fox is playing a tape of the witnesses saying, we felt really crappy when you made fun of us, and that wasn't cool, dude. And you see it. He even seems to get emotional. Did you see that? I feel like
I did see it. Yeah, it was really something.
Yeah, and then he says, I saw it too. And then he goes on to say some other things, like the Pentagon knew, and he thinks that he was in the Air Force and this sort of thing happened, and they were supposed to report these sort of things. And he says some really interesting things, I think, in that video.
I do too. When I had, I'm trying to think who it was on my show. The woman you actually said she was a wonderful person, the one that was involved in politics.
Oh, Frances Barwood.
Thank you.
Yes.
God, I lost her name. When I had her on, there were people in my chat room that were bashing Fife Symington, by this, saying he was a felon and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I thought it was crazy, and then so I had one of the people in the chat room, I had them forward me whatever information that they were, coming up with, and nothing, there was some type of thing where he, I guess, was filling out some paperwork for something and didn't disclose something. And they kind of held something over him. So Francis thought there was possibly something going on with that, why he did that whole thing as far as the alien coming out with him and saying, you guys are taking this far too serious, that type of thing. They think that he had pressure against him because of that situation and why he did that. It'd be interesting to know if he ever talks about that.
He has talked to people about that and said, no, that's not the case. And not publicly, though. This is from what I understand.
I see.
Of people who have asked him this, same thing in the background. No, I think that the real answer to me makes sense in that he just wanted, and I think that's at the heart of this whole thing, kind of like what John Alexander talks about, is he just didn't want any part of it. He wanted people to shut up so they could get back to business and doing their regular job, and he's like, how can I stop this whole thing and let's just move on, so I quit getting these stupid UFO questions, and we can move back just to regular business and get back to things. So, that's what he said. He just wanted to kind of disarm the whole thing, to cool, like he says, to have everybody chill out and move on. And so he made fun of it. And when it comes to something that is where you just don't know what the hell it is, but you're the person who's supposed to come up with an answer, I could see how people would be motivated by, I don't know what it is. These things are stupid, so let's just move on. That's it. It seems like an attitude a lot of people have, even in the Air Force, and certainly people I've talked to where they're like, I don't want to be associated with UFOs, so I'm not going to report this, or I am going to report it. Charles Halt talks about this, where he just, filled out the report. Let's move on. We don't know what it is. Yeah. Let's just move on with our lives. So I think a lot of people have that feeling in government, and so I don't know. That's what he says. He says it didn't have to do with the pressure that he had felt because he had some legal issues, like all politicians.
Yeah,
but
right.
I don't know. As far as the people hating, it's just, people just love to hate.
Yeah. You do see that. Unfortunately, you do see that a lot online.
Yep. But it does sound like he didn't get any support. So that probably had to make things even more difficult for him, in that if he really was looking for answers and no one was helping him. And that's essentially what happened to Frances. She was looking for answers, and no one, including Symington's office, would help her.
Amazing, isn't it?
It is. And just to remind people, Frances Barward is a Phoenix City councilwoman. She was a councilwoman at the time. She heard about the sighting a couple days after, when a news reporter said, "Hey, don't you have anything to say about this whole UFO situation?" and she's like, "What are you talking about? What UFO situation?" And then she started to make inquiries, spoke to something like 700 plus witnesses, and which was a credit to her. She's just a great person. And I interviewed her years ago. We had her at the UFO Congress also. And you can see her video on our on-demand section. And I really highly, highly recommend everybody look at it, because she's, I think, one of the greatest stories in the whole Phoenix Lights. And they can go listen to your recent interview with her.
Yes, I had so much positive feedback from listeners after I interviewed her. And I interviewed a few other people that same show. And everyone said, "Oh, why didn't you just keep on with her? She was wonderful."
Yeah.
Real nice lady. And, full of integrity, too.
Yeah, she's great. So, and she always sends these really nice notes.
Yes.
She hasn't been able to make the conference the last couple of years, health issues, even though she doesn't live too far away. She's in Sedona, I believe. Beautiful area out here. And so she'll send a note. I hope you guys had a great conference. Sorry I couldn't make it. And she's a wonderful person.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So any more news, my friend?
Not that I can think of. No one's landed on the White House lawn yet.
No? Okay. Well, we can keep our fingers crossed that happens. Although I wouldn't recommend they go there.
Me
right
neither.
Now.
Not now.
So maybe choose another location. They can come, they visit the park across the parking lot here. It's a beautiful park. It's a sunny day. That would be perfect. We would, at Open Minds, bring our cameras out and interview the aliens. So hopefully they come land there. They're going to have to be careful, though, because as we were starting the show, one of the kids playing football came over and urinated. I don't think he knew that all of us in the offices could see him, but he came over and urinated on this building over in the park. So be careful of that. Yeah, and that'd be a perfect landing spot for them. So there's my invitation.
There you go. Hopefully they'll hear it.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much, Martin. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
My pleasure, and thank you. I will.
And let's go ahead and talk to Cheryl. I am very happy to welcome back to the show Cheryl Costa. Hello.
Hi. How you doing?
Good.
How's things in Arizona, sir?
Oh, so far so good. Things are doing pretty well, especially when you're not sick. And this time of year, the weather out here is wonderful. So it's nice to be able to get out there.
I think the big problem is you have a lot of what I call typhoid or flu Marys that fly out there. They're not feeling well, and then they take it to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
My problem is I've got a spouse who works at a college library, and all these kids think they're invulnerable.
Yeah.
And so she's bringing home something about every other week from the kids.
I hear you. So, and speaking of whom, Linda co-wrote the book with you.
Yes.
And I guess getting down to it, we all know, at least I've spoken about you, and I think the audience knows, and we've had you on the show before, right? I'm sure we've talked.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
we talked last year.
So people are familiar with you and your work, are my listeners. So what role did Linda have in the book?
Well, two things. One, she's had a ton of experience because we both lived in Washington, D.C., and she worked for various scientific organizations. So we wanted to lay the book out like a scientific report. Okay? That's why we got such a boring cover, because she wanted to lay it out like something that might be on some congressman's desk, from some cabinet organization that does scientific work, and that was her intent. In fact, if you go through the book right now, it looks like, and I got to send you one. I forgot about that. If you go through the book, it looks like it was laid out by the Census Department, and that's the context we wanted. And so she was going to do. She did layout. She acted as editor because, again, she has that publishing background. But the other thing she did was she was also. She knew a lot of what I was doing, all the compiling of all the state statistics, and every now and then she'd come over to me and say, "Did you happen to notice this weird pattern?" And I had been so busy putting everything together, there were times I didn't see something really strange or really interesting, and she pointed these things out to me. Plus, she helped write the first 5 chapters. We have narrative in there before we get into the actual statistics of each state, which the average state has 5 pages. A couple of states like Texas and some of the really big ones, they have a lot of counties have more, but that's pretty much the deal. It's it's almost a 370-page book with everything.
So it seems like you're very proud of this book.
We are. We are.
And in your mind,
this amounts to, this is something that a lot of people haven't figured out yet. What we have done for the first time ever is we have conducted a nationwide UFO census.
Right, and for instance, I mean, what is the significance of that?
Well, we can literally tell you. We have a summary chapter. It's got all the stats for all the states, all kind of summed up into a couple of charts and a couple of tables in the front, about 4 or 5 pages. That's just for the United States and all 50 states and the district. Okay. We didn't do any territories. We're going to save the territories for an international book we have in the works. The interesting thing is we took each state, did its full numbers, it's top 10 counties, top 10 shapes, and we can literally drill down to the county level. Now, neither database, NUFORC or MUFON, neither one of NUFORC doesn't collect county data, and MUFON does, but it's very highly dependent upon the person who's filling out the report, and you wouldn't believe how many people didn't know what county they were in, or left blank. So we just went ahead and went by the cities that we had, and when we were doing what we call scrubbing of the databases, we went ahead and we had a master city to county list, and we went ahead and inserted county data for everything. And there's 327 counties in the United States. I'm sorry, 3,027 counties in the United States. So this took a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of work. How long have you been working on this overall?
Okay, the whole project took 16 months.
Okay, that's pretty good.
It took me about 10 to 11 months to compile all the data. And then, in fact, in the book, we instead of doing an introduction, we did an FAQ, okay, to answer common questions. And in the book, we say 14 months, but when we actually wrote that statement, we ran into some snags in the layout and things like this, and running a proof with Amazon and all that kind of stuff. And by the time we got done, it was a total of 16 months.
Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of work, because I know, talking to you, you've been working on this. Has it been like a little bit every day, at least, certainly weekly, at least?
Yeah, well, what we tell most people is it basically chewed up all but 3 weekends over the last year and a half.
Wow.
It was in the longer weekends, But when I say all but 3, there was one where we were sick on our backs with the flu,
mm-hmm.
or something like it for a day or two, but it messed up the weekend. And there were a couple of things where there were some family obligations we had to kind of go to. But so I usually made up for some of that during the week after work. But at the time I had a very high-powered job at a bank, and I was doing similar type of crunching at the bank at a very high level, and so I was usually pretty fried when I came home.
Mm-hmm.
But I would give you an example. If I was crunching a state and I was doing it during the week, I did something really small, some Midwestern state that didn't have a lot of sightings, because you're talking, give me an example. Say I sat down and did New York State the first time, and it took me a weekend, a 4-day weekend to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost close to 5,000 records. California, I had to do over 2 weekends because it was 15,000 records.
Whoa.
Well, actually, closer to 16,000. It says 15,835 records. So it was pretty crazy. And there were other little tweaks we had to make here and there. But for the most part, towards the end, as I was compiling, I did most of the other states, and I saved the top 10 states sorted to last because
mm-hmm.
I knew they were going to take a lot of time. That's kind of how it worked out.
Mm-hmm. So the sources for the data, of course, there's MUFON, which we referenced, which is the largest investigative organization. The other large group or a large reporting center would be the National UFO Reporting Center. Were those your 2 main sources of data?
Yes, I was most familiar with those 2.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, while I did have some people come to me later and tell me there were other databases, I wasn't really familiar with them. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I do write a newspaper column and have been doing it for 3 years. So I'm in National UFO Reporting Center and MUFON literally every week looking at things, So I had a good sense for how they were laid out and everything. The goofy thing about it is National UFO Reporting Center and was typically about 60% of the data, and MUFON was about 40%. Some states it was 70-30. There was one state it was like 80-20. And there were 3, MUFON being the smaller, there were 3 states that MUFON was the dominant one. Okay? Texas was one of them, amazingly enough. And so that was a key thing to keep in mind, was that there's different ratios. In fact, with every state, when we do the little format of the state chart, and then we start breaking things down, we do have a little box towards the last page of each state's worth of stats, and we have a breakdown that says, okay, New Fork was this, MUFON was that, gave the number of the total number based on what you're seeing in the report, and then the percentages.
Mm-hmm. Now
we do a summary of those. We do a summary of those percentages in the front summary of the book.
Yeah. And I would argue that those are the biggies by far. So, I mean, I think it makes sense to focus on those 2 organizations the most because yeah, by far they've collected. And interesting enough, Newfork's been the advantage they've had. They've been online longer than MUFON. In fact, your book ranges from 2001 to 2015. I don't think you probably know exactly because you were working with the data. MUFON didn't get their data online till what? Something like 2007?
Yeah, it was like 2006, 2007 time frame. They had a bulletin board system collection going on in the late 90s, but it wasn't really online on the web until, like you said, around 2006, 2007 time frame. Mm-hmm. And they just did some major changes to it again, so they're constantly trying to upgrade it. The National UFO Reporting Center, one of the things that was kind of nice there is because it was all available online. Now, not the confidential stuff, not a layer down at the investigator level, but the public level, which is all we used. We only used the actual dates and years, that type of thing, the states, cities and state, and the shapes. That's all we used. We didn't use the actual sighting data. In fact, there was somebody at MUFON raised the stink about that. Oh my God, she did all this stuff without permission, and we explained that everything we did had been given to us at a public level, and I didn't have deep access or anything like that. And that was all we were interested in.
It's funny how that happens, because that happens to me too, because I'll usually compile a yearly report of a high-level overview of the stats of UFOs for the year, and there's always those people saying, where they're getting access that everybody else can't get. But no, I use the monthly emails that come out where MUFON gives some stats, and it's just public information. That's the beauty of Newfork, keeping it simple, that it's a much easier job to cut and paste that information into an Excel than it is, even though the MUFON database is very sophisticated and collects a lot of different things. It's much more difficult, actually, to access some of those numbers.
Well, what was funny is I had some cooperation from them. Initially, I had a lot of pushback, and I was having a lot of trouble getting the data. And then finally, I got some high-level people in MUFON talking to me. Linda sat down. She's an executive. I guess she got on the phone and did some executive talk with them. And Roger Powell, mm-hmm. He shipped me a file. Now, the problem was, the file he sent me did not have like the last 3 or 4 months worth of 2015. So I had to physically manually go in to the website and look up each state for a very narrow window of time. It was a little time consuming. It was one of those things I did every night after work before supper kind of thing. And then I caught it all up. If there's any holes in the data, it's because I had to go and gather the last quarter of 2015 that manual way. But the stuff that he shared with me, I scrubbed the stuff that they would be touchy about. I scrubbed that right out immediately, and then started cleaning it up and aligning the stuff so I could suck it into the same database that I had all the Newfork data in.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about there's over 3,000 counties in the United States. Does that mean, do you feel then, like your book, you can drill down to that level, and is there a UFO sighting in every county?
I'm going to say yes.
Uh-huh.
Now, I just did an article in my columns.
Yeah, I saw that.
There's 300 counties that have only had one. They're what I call one-hit wonders. They had one UFO sighting in the 15-year window. A lot of them were in Texas because Texas has like 256 counties, and some of them are just out there, not much more than sagebrush. Mm-hmm. So that kind of like how it shook out. There are some now. There may have been some we missed. If you look at a particular state during that period of time, you'll see, particularly some counties, you'll see maybe only 1 or 2 sightings in the 15 years as you go across. In the book, we've got 2001 in rows, vertical rows, 2001 through 2015, and then the counties are going down the side. So you might look at such and such county, and maybe only see 1 or 2 or 3 sightings scattered across the 15 years. So like I said, I did screen it all at one point to see if anybody didn't have one, and that was one of the points that Linda brought up. Every single county that we measured had at least one.
Wow. Yeah, and that was a really creative idea to write a story about where are there not UFOs being reported.
Yeah, my boss gave it that title. I didn't even know what to call it, but he said where UFOs are scarce, And it was interesting. It was a total of 300 counties. The top 10 were like listed in the county or listed in the article, and there's a couple more interesting ones where I'm going to drill down and look at the stuff. You know what happened? That article, there was about 2 weeks ago, there was this huge amount of press out on the West Coast because
I was going to go
2
there.
stories broke. Washington State, I had given them the Seattle Post Intelligencer, they call it Seattle PI. I had pitched the story to them, and they liked it, so they got Jake Ellison, who was a stringer for them, to write the story. And he had it all done a good week and a half, 2 weeks before we physically released the book. And we were still doing a proof thing with Amazon at the time. So they decided to sit on it until the actual book was available so they could give a link out to the Amazon site. And then what I didn't know was, during the course of the interview, he asked me, well, what's the top state? And I said, it was California. And he took a little bit of information about California, and he turned around and did a similar article, except more tuned to California, and gave it to SF Gate, which is the San Francisco Chronicle's online edition. Well, about halfway in the middle of the afternoon, the day the article came out, I get this phone call from a producer at KBC, 790 Talk Radio out there in L.A. He says, yeah, can we have you on this afternoon? I said, sure, why? He says, story came out in San Francisco Gate, and social media is on fire. Everybody's talking about it. California's number one, And that's how all that went down. It was amazing.
That's really funny. Now, with California being number one, is it more of an issue of population, do you feel, or do you feel that perhaps even per capita there are more sightings per person out there?
I would say there are. We did in the book. We did a thing about. I did an analysis based on population versus amount of sightings within like the top 10 states. Mm-hmm. And while there's a very large population out there, you do. I have 2 overlapping charts, and you can see that the populations for the top 10 states all sit there in this one little range, but California's numbers are through the roof. I'll give you an example. California's 15,835 sightings. Okay, that is twice Florida and Texas. Florida was 7,787, and Texas was, I think, 7,058, something like that. And so it's double. At that point, when you get to the rest of the top 10 states, California is 3 times what all the rest of those states are. Now, and their populations are still pretty significant. New York State, hell, we're almost 20 million here, so it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And having been in this and written about it for a while, what are your thoughts as to why that is the case?
Why is what the case?
That California has so many sightings compared to elsewhere.
Well, that's what bothered me for a little bit, particularly Southern California, okay? I did a little bit of research here, and what I had to do was I went out, and this is about a week ago, and I did this for just a couple of states. I wanted to see what the deal was. And I determined that there were, you know how they talk about that 37th parallel, 37 degrees latitude? Well, I managed to go out and get latitude information for the cities in these different states, Okay, and I took out, at the time, to make things easier, I only put it in the top 10 states, and I only did it for the 37 degrees, and everything within 37 degrees. And California had a significant number of its counties were in the 37-degree thing. Mm-hmm. Now, I got to qualify this. Correlation does not mean causality. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's coming from Linda, who always tells me this. Now, one other thing you should know. What surprised me is L.A. Now, L.A. by itself was 3,212 sightings in that 15-year window. It was more than 40 individual states by itself. Okay, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't know this little fact. I was watching one of these, there's a ton of channels and higher channels that are running all kinds of UFO documentaries, okay? Mm-hmm. And I saw this one I had never seen before, and they indicated that L.A. had been seeing UFOs since before we had manned flight. They had squadrons of these things being seen in the 1880s, 1890s, okay? And at the turn of the 20th century, so the LA Basin area has been a hotbed for it for well over 100 years. Mm-hmm. So that surprised me, and I went out and did a little bit of research, and that's the deal. So when I was talking to KABC, I pointed that fact out, and you'd be surprised how many people there in LA didn't know this.
Interesting. I've also found it, and I wonder if your numbers demonstrated this as well, which may explain some of the Southern California part of it more specifically, is that per person, it seems like the Southwest itself, the Southwest states have a lot of are really high on the list. For example, Arizona and Colorado have always been on really high on my list as far as UFOs per person. So it kind of seems like the Southwest United States is a hot spot kind of area. Is that, do your numbers show that, you think?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. I'll give you the real number here in a moment. Just let me peel. I have a copy of the book here in front of me. All right. California, of course, was number 1. Arizona is number 7 in the country. Mm-hmm. Okay. And as we dig down a little deeper, let me go here. Colorado's number 12. So this is a big deal. Okay, so out of 50 states, Colorado ranks number 12, and of course Arizona ranks number 7. And there's something interesting about both those states. Maricopa County, there in Arizona, is number 2 to Los Angeles County.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Just so people know, that is like the most populous county here. That's the Phoenix area. That's where I'm at right now.
Right.
Should I be worried?
Well, I don't know. Give you an example. The Maricopa County had 2,523 for the 15-year sample period, and as compared to 3,032. 12 for LA. That's a big deal. They're number 2 in the country. And that was the weird thing. I was trying to pitch it to the newspaper down there. I said, you guys are like number 2 in the country just on your own. And you're ahead of like 35 states. They weren't interested.
Which is funny, unless it's tied to, and maybe I can plug, I'm going to be doing a ton of media this week and next week in the local media because of a new movie about. It's very loosely based. It's a horror movie, but they're basing it off the Phoenix Lights. And if you could, that's the news here loves the Phoenix Lights UFO phenomena. And so if you mention Phoenix Lights, then they get excited. That's for you as a clue how it might help you get in. But I'll mention your book, and I'll mention that when I do these interviews because this movie is coming out, so they all want to do interviews about the Phoenix Lights. So. That's one of the things. They love the Phoenix Lights out here.
Yeah. Well, when I reached out to a Fox station there. I think it was Fox 10, and I reached out to the Arizona Republic. My pitch was, hey, and this was like 3 weeks ahead of the anniversary. I said, hey, you've got the 20th anniversary of Phoenix Lights coming up. How would you like some current stats? Mind-blowing stats. And the producer at Fox 10 kept telling me, yeah, I want to use it. And then by the time they got around to talking to me, they were already 4.5 minutes worth of news story, and they decided not to use any of it. Which is a darn shame, because I love hearing about things that happened 20 years ago and everything, but what's happening now? I'm sorry, I'm in the news business. That's old news.
Yeah. I hear you, and usually that's what the news wants, is what's happening now. But I don't know. People, as you know, in this field, the media can be really weird. You never know what's really going to get them excited or motivated to do something serious about the topic. Have you had other successes, though? I mean, California went crazy. Like you said, tons and tons and tons of stories on your book and about how you found California to be number one. I know I've seen a few others, though, media outlets who have also kind of picked up and wanted to do stats in their areas as well.
Well, actually, most of them are just reprinting variants of the story, the California story, because the California story mentioned the top 10 states. None of them have actually reached out to me. Now, that said, I'll say it this way: the Gannett people, who own USA Today and a whole bunch of other regional newspapers. I originally pitched them back around 3 weeks before Phoenix Lights as well. I was a couple of weeks out from releasing our book, so I was out pitching to people, and they blew me off. They were polite about it, but they said no, not now. And then after that stuff went in California, suddenly they've taken an interest. Same thing with a news outfit in the New York City area, because I went to them and pitched Long Island, and they were a Long Island news outlet. And because Long Island, Suffolk County, Long Island, is number one in New York State. Now, in the UFO community, you'll hear everybody talk, Pine Bush, New York, that's where the capital of UFOs are. I'm going to tell you the truth. 5 other counties have far more UFO sightings than Pine Bush does.
Really? Okay. That's fascinating.
Yes. That's their hype. They got a festival, they got to hype it up. But,
well, it's a bubble burster, unfortunately. But it's kind of an anecdotal, since they're known for it. I guess they look more, and then they see stuff, and it makes news. But it's all about the numbers.
Yeah, well, I wrote an article about a year ago. I had already done the New York State numbers, and I said, if we're ever going to have a New York State UFO conference, it ought to be done in Suffolk County, Long Island, because that is the hot spot for New York State, and that's kind of where it went, but. There's been amazing numbers here, amazing stats. One point we did in our analysis, we didn't have an easy way to break this down into regions of the United States, so we used standard stuff from the Census Department. We used Census Department maps, Census Department regions and divisions. It made sense. In fact, all the government agencies use that, so we figured, let's do that too. That's how we managed to break it down. So. It's a it's an 8.5, 11 by book. And in fact, when I gave my mother her copy, she looked at this thing and says, "My God, this is a lethal weapon." It's a thick book.
So, what about surprises? Were there some surprises you came across looking at the numbers?
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you one right off the bat. People come to me and say, UFOs, they all got to be up in Alaska. No. UFOs, they all got to be in the desert. Well, which part of the desert?
Yeah.
If you're in Phoenix, yeah, absolutely, it's through the roof. But there's other places, no, it's not there. Well, what about the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.? Bottom of the freaking list.
Yeah.
There was not much there. But, okay, what you have to do is remember, Washington is a business. It's only a 20 square mile area, 20 by 20. Everybody lives in Maryland and Virginia and Delaware. Okay, we call it Delmarva. Okay, and so everybody just lives around it. So most of the sightings we think that were probably associated with Washington D.C. probably were reported in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia bedroom communities.
That makes sense.
Another surprise. I did a posting in the UFO groups over the weekend where I had a screenshot from a 1949 declassified CIA document that was from the Office of Scientific Investigation, where Dr. So-and-so and Dr. So-and-so were discussing this, and one of the bullet points was, has anybody noticed that there seems to be a seasonal pattern? And he had kind of little pattern, little chart down there with 25 or 30 sighting dots going across it. And he had a little question at the bottom of the page, what is this, some kind of summer madness or something? Something to that effect. This is in 1949. We're talking 68 years ago. All right. Well, I didn't see it. I had seen this pattern in New York State. Okay, it's kind of low and quiescent, 5, 10 sightings, January, February, March, April, it ticks up just a tiny bit. May, it starts ticking up. June, July, and August, it goes through the rough. Big hump there, okay? July and August being the high season, and then starts ticking back down again and levels off when you get out around November and December to the same kind of numbers that January has. Well, we thought that was what the pattern was. And everybody's common logic, what I'm going to call common horse sense logic, says, well, it's summertime. More people are out. In the summertime, it's nice weather. Okay. All right. What if I told you it was latitude dependent?
That'd be weird.
I didn't know this. Linda was putting the thing together, and at one point she said she'd already done about 20 of the states. And she says, have you noticed this pattern? Because at the end of the state books, I did the UFOs by month. A goofy little chart. I did them by month. And a couple of people I knew said, why are you even bothering listing them by month?
No, that's great. I love that. And you did that for every state?
Every state.
Because I think I would love to see Arizona. It might be the opposite, because everybody's inside in the summer, actually, in Arizona, because we're hiding from the heat like cockroaches.
You told me that.
Yeah.
But there's one other goofy thing about the whole thing. All right. If you're up in the States kind of like Maine, which is kind of parallel to a lot of Canadian countries, the sightings pick up around August and trail off slowly in the fall. Okay, get a little further down to New England and down to about like New York State, Pennsylvania, go across to Michigan, that type of thing, and you got your little hump in the middle there, June, July, August, and to some degree September. Okay, nice big peak. You get down around Virginia and West Virginia, that bump in the middle starts flattening, starts coming down. When you get into the deep south and southwest states, the sightings per month are statistically flat. They're not physically flat, but they're statistically flat. Now, that lends more weight to the fact that the weather's nicer down there.
Yeah.
Okay? Year-round. Okay? And Arizona's like that. Florida's like that. Texas is like that. Southern California's like that.
So yeah, that's really interesting, though. But at least you're confirming by numbers that, the nicer the weather, the more consistent, the weather, the more consistent the UFO sightings.
Okay, now the only two places that completely falls apart, Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska has all their high sightings through the winter months. November, December, January, February, March, and starts coming down and gets down to around April. Those numbers are falling, and during the June, July, August time frame, it bottoms out.
I wonder if there's a correlation with daylight, because they have the longer days.
That's what we figure. When most people see things, they see them typically at night, know, And what do they got at that time? At that time of the season, white nights.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the only correlation we could make sense of was. They see more UFOs because it's dark all the time during the winter months, but when the summer months come, it's daylight all the time. There's nothing to see.
Yeah.
Or very little.
Uh-huh. And then Hawaii?
Hawaii. Well, Hawaii has these quarterly bumps.
Huh.
And
Weird.
I'm checking it out with the travel agencies. Our first guess is that these are periods for people traveling to Hawaii quarterly.
Interesting.
For everything from weddings to vacations or something like that. There must be what they call hot travel seasons, and that's what we think the deal is. It's like Florida to some degree. Florida, all the snowbirds go down to Florida in the wintertime, and so we see a little bit of a bump there, for the winter months. And so that's what we think might be the deal. Who knows for sure?
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, though. Quarterly bumps.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. And it's all over the place. But then again, it might just be an artifact of reporting. The people who are reporting are seeing things. They're probably visiting. And this is the first time maybe they live in a big city or something like this. This is the first time they've actually been out on a nice temperate night, and in a place that doesn't have a huge amount of light pollution.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we think. And so we're not 100% sure what the numbers really should be for Hawaii, but everything that we had from both databases has this up and down quarterly bump type thing going on. And then there's one last really weird surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, two things we noticed with the monthlies, and I did a summary of everything. February, nationwide, is the lowest sighting month in the entire country.
Interesting.
It is lower by about 3% than any other month, at least 3 to 5%. Okay, minimum. And the other thing we noticed was...
That's because everybody's at our conference.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yep.
And amazingly enough, even for being out in the desert like it is, most of us are not outside looking at the sky, So.
Yeah, exactly. We're either inside or we're engrossed in discussing UFOs with each other.
You bet. Now, the last one that we had that was really an eye-opener was, in fact, I wrote it up in the book when I was discussing the seasonal pattern in my analysis.
Uh-huh.
I wrote up one of the last things, I could not let it go. I said we had to talk about New Mexico. New Mexico has the characteristic statistically flat sightings for all the months, except for September. September spikes.
Huh. September.
Remember this. Yeah, and I literally say in the book, if anybody knows what's going on in September, will they please let me know?
Have you heard anything?
No, I haven't heard anything yet. But there aren't that many copies of the book out there. There's probably 50 or 100 copies of the book out there in circulation right now. So I'll wait for somebody to come back and tell me. But it was like the numbers were like 3-4 times the rest of that flatness and sightings.
Wow, that is really strange. That's really interesting. So hopefully maybe some listeners will have some insight as to what's going on in New Mexico in September. Now, I've spent quite a bit of time out there. My mom lived out there for
wait a minute. That's Roswell State, isn't it?
That is Roswell State.
But Roswell, the event itself was in July. The convention for it is in July.
Yeah, late June, early July. So yeah, what the heck, huh?
So that threw us a curve. That really threw us a curve.
Yeah, that is a weird one. September. Yeah, I can't think of anything, and I love New Mexico. That's one of my states. I mean, because like I said, my mom lived there, and I would go out there a lot. So Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona are kind of and then California are my states of residence that I visit or have family in that I love the most.
I love New Mexico, and
I do too.
I had a wonderful time the couple of times I went out there. I spent like about 3 weeks out there once. Well, okay, well, let me qualify that. Okay, the average monthly thing was sitting around 100 sightings a month. Okay, and it goes up to that for that 1 month. It goes up, and for October it's slightly elevated. It goes up to almost 200 sightings per month. It's like 198 sightings. And then so October is 138, but the rest of them are all sitting around 100, 120. And it just blew me away. Now, what I've been tempted to do when I get a little bit of time, I'm thinking about putting a map of New Mexico up on the wall, and again go into the county charts and see if there's a dominant county or a cluster of counties where this stuff is going on. That's the next piece of exploration. But I couldn't do all this. I've had a lot of people say, well, why didn't you do more research? And I said, it took me, almost 18 months to just compile the data, And then that's why we made this for other people. We made this for scientific research. We made this for people who are interested in it, people who are MUFON investigators or any kind of investigators out there, armchair investigators. Me, hey, I'm an armchair investigator. Computers, libraries is where I do my work. I do not march around in farmers' fields with cow patties, ticks, and barbed wire.
And that's what this book is great for, and it's one of the things that I think everybody in this field, serious researchers, always feel that is lacking is enough statistical research, because we have the data. But it takes so much, and there's not a lot of people going through and putting together the data like you are, because it is so laborious. It takes a lot of work. So that's what's great about what you've done, because as soon as I get my copy, which I'm very excited for, I'll be referencing that probably on a weekly basis.
Yeah. The two guys who I know Dr. Gordon Spear. He comes to IUFOC religiously. He's a retired astronomer from Sonoma University. Him and Rich Hoffman, Alabama chief investigator, they did the foreword for the book.
Great.
And the thing that they both were excited about, particularly Dr. Spear, is somebody finally did big data crunching. Even Project Blue Book only had 12,000 sightings to work from. We had 100. Okay, here's the big number for your listeners: 100. And the press from that California article said over 120,000. The real number is 121,036. And for that 15-year window, and the number is increasing, and we've made certain adjustments. We've watched certain things. There are some artifacts of reporting where certain things happen, like on the MUFON stuff. Around 2008, somebody did Discovery Channel, somebody did a documentary about MUFON, and their numbers jumped. And then you look at New Fork, it goes along on trend, but MUFON's jumps up about 30%. And it levels out into a trend, And so then there's an artifact of reporting with 2012. Everybody was overly conscious with the end of the Mayan calendar and all this kind of stuff. There was a high level of awareness, and there was an astronomical jump that year nationwide. The thing is that if you look at anybody who ever looks at the UFO numbers from year to year, there's like about a 7-year humpy cycle. They kind of hump along like little waves on the ocean, and if you look carefully at the chart, you'll see that those humps kind of, even as it's going up in intensity, except for that 1 year it seems to be spiking, but if you kind of draw that curve right through that line, you see it starting to go into a downward hump. So, everything seems to be consistent. One of the things somebody was bugging me about here recently, and this is one of the skeptics, he said, well, it's all crackpots and nuts, he says to me. And this is a guy I knew working for the bank. I have since retired. I retired on Valentine's Day.
Congratulations.
And thank you. In fact, that my spouse, Linda, made a very big point of making that she literally called me up at work on Valentine's Day, said, "I am giving you a Valentine's Day present, and it is take this job and shove it card."
Cool.
And about an hour later, I literally put my laptop on my boss's desk, took my badge off, and said, "I've had enough. Bye."
Awesome.
But the deal is, what was I saying before I went off that line? The kooks and nuts thing, right?
Yeah,
I get this a lot.
Goofy statement.
I had a TV station here locally talking to me last week, okay? "Oh, how do we know these numbers are credible and they're not all kooks and nuts?" That's literally the quote. Well, what we found going through the records, we found that it was barely 2%, okay, for one.
Mm-hmm.
Most people just want to get it off their chest. You know, they just want to get it off their chest.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell that you can hear the sincerity in what they're saying, how they write it up, okay? And the other thing was, I pointed, I don't even want to say this.
This is going to be good. This is going to be juicy if you're trying to figure out how to work.
The bottom line is that it's not all kooks and nuts. It's very sincere people. So one of the arguments we made in the book, in fact, we have a chapter in the book called 121,036 Eyewitness Reports. And it takes that line to one of your speakers at IUFOC had a couple of years ago that said, except for UFOs, unless you have forensics evidence, eyewitness testimony can get you convicted in every court in this country, you know, so why doesn't it apply here, you know, and that's where we kind of made our little statement about disclosure. But this is the thing that we saw consistently is most people were very sincere. The people I have met doing a columnist where I've had families invite me over to I don't do this a lot, but every now and then I'll get invited to a backyard barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go over there and I'll introduce myself. "Oh, yeah. We want you to meet Uncle Ralph or Aunt Mabel. She saw a UFO." Yeah. So you sit down with them, and they look like combat veterans when you talk to them. If they really are telling you the truth, you can see it in their eyes. They are living it again.
Right.
And I've seen this time and time and time again. And this is when I tell these guys that these TV stations are being all callous about this. And I said, look, everybody I talk to is giving a sincere report, and there's no place to report this stuff. The Air Force hasn't been doing it since '68. The local newspaper, I talk to them, they say they get 7 reports a week, but they blow everybody off as a nut.
Mm-hmm.
The cops, they write it down on the blotter, but unless it's a risk to health and safety, they don't pay any attention.
Yeah.
You know, I went and checked these things out. So another reason we did this for 2001 to 2015. Remember in 2001 after 9/11, they said, "Report what you see."
Mm-hmm.
So we took that tone in here too. Hey, we were asked to report what we see. Well, this is what 121,000 people reported.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when I became a MUFON investigator, my first case was a security guard who was just back from the Middle East, and he was in that mindset, report what you see. Very, very credible witness. In fact, all of the cases I got where I spoke to people, the people were very credible and very normal. They weren't kooks and weirdos.
There was a reporter asked me, the guy from the Seattle PI asked me, he says, who's the most common person to report these things? And I said, from my observation, and after talking to some MUFON investigators, people taking the dog for a walk before bedtime, people going out for a smoke and taking the dog for a walk, or just people going out on the back porch for a smoke.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was the most common thing we saw through the whole database, was this continuous flavor of story, and then motorists, and then everything else, you know. So this has been an eye-opening, I don't want to call it a spiritual experience, but it has been a rush to do these. And it would be so many. There were so many times I would get done with a state, and when I was sure the data was clean enough to do a table on it, I'd crank the table program to see what it looked like. You know, I couldn't wait. It was like a kid on Christmas morning. You know, I got to see what the state has. You know.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, now that we're getting kind of out of time, but with 120,000 or so sightings, is it your feeling that represents 120,000 or so people or more?
Well, okay. Let's use Stanton Friedman's formula. 1 in 10 reports. And I did a chapter like this in the book. And I said, while there are other people who say that number might be bigger or whatever, I went with his. 1 in 10 people report what they see. So we said, 121,000 times 10, that's 1.2 million. And I cranked it back and said, investigators tell me that this stuff is about 6 or 7%. And we started looking at the numbers. We eliminated the obvious shapes that could easily be military craft, triangles, blimps, that kind of thing. And guess what? That 121,000 ends up being about 6.5% of the 1.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at the thing and says, there's a lot more out there. It's a difference of, hey, there's 8,000 sightings a year. If you use the Friedman factor, as we call it, there's 80,000 out there a year.
Well, and I mean, even for just a number of people reporting, I look at reports every day, and you've probably seen this as well. Many of the reports say me and my mom were outside, me and my wife, or me and my kids. So a lot, although there's only one report, there are often, 2 or 3 witnesses associated with that report. And to me, I think just it at least signifies or shows that there's a social or cultural significance to hundreds of thousands of people,
Well, this is the other thing I was going to tell you about the family reunion. I've observed that families are handing down these UFO sightings like family heirlooms.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Treasured stories. I did 2 stories like this. One that was set back in the 30s and one that was set back in the 1880s. And both these little old ladies came to me and sat down and had a cup of coffee with me and told me these amazing stories. And of some relative of theirs that had this sighting, and in great detail. And I said, well, how do you know so much detail about it? He says, everybody in our family knows this story. So there's this whole family heirloom thing, and it's amazing when you hear people talking about these things.
That is really interesting. That's kind of a modern kind of folklore type of thing. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. There's tons more to tell. Maybe I can come to the next IUOC and give some really amazing slides.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. So send us some more info on that. Otherwise, everybody can get the book at Amazon. Is that the best place to go?
Yes, the name of the book is UFO Sightings Desk Reference. And then United States of America, 2001-2015. And if you Google it, believe me, it'll come right to the top of Googling. And you can order it from them, and they'll have it to you within 72 hours typically.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show again. I'll definitely rely on you when as time goes on, and I'm sure this data will reveal more and more, and I'm sure you'll see more and more in this data as time goes on. You did mention, actually, what you're working on your next project, and that is an international version of this book. Is that correct?
Yes, I've captured that data, and it's not as clean. It doesn't actually have a good country field. It was put in the same field as the city, so I literally had to write some scripting code to separate that out and build a new column. And we're in the process of cleaning that up right now. It's time consuming, and we've been busy trying to get this book launched and everything. But I am working on I'm working on 2. I'm working on the international. And we're working on doing a variant of the same book, but do it where we literally can break. It's called the Shapes Manual, and you can literally be reports for individual counties and their shapes.
Awesome.
so it should be fun.
Yeah, that will be terribly interesting. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, but thank you so much for putting this data together, because it is very, very important stuff. And, it's the type of stuff that some of us researchers, like I'm good friends with some Robert Powell and Richard Hoffman, some of the people you mentioned, and, we just eat up and love this stuff. So this is really exciting.
Thank you very much. Have me on again.
All right, will do. Thank you so much to Cheryl Costa for joining us once again on the show. She is great. She's always a lot of fun. She's so full of energy and so positive. I love speaking with her. She's inspiring. She gets me excited about stuff again all the time. So it's always just fun to talk with her, let alone about this wonderful new book that she has. So remember, that is the UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2015. It's one of those types of things where it looks like what it is, kind of a desk reference where something for you to look at. It's going to go right next to my Governments and UFOs. That's something that you guys got to look up if you haven't gotten it. Of course, that was done by a bunch of authors, and it has government documents in it. So I'm going to have both of these together to get all of the data I need at my fingertips. So like Cheryl Costa said, go to Amazon and you can look up UFO Sightings Desk Reference and it will pop up. I think even if you just go to Google, I went to Google and put Cheryl Costa Amazon and it popped up as well. So luckily, that's how we find stuff now. We go to Google and we search. I mean, URLs are even like out the door. Nobody cares about UFO.com or something. They're just going to go Google, and that's how they will find it. If you Google Open Minds UFO News or something like that, you're going to find us, or Open Minds UFO. You'll find us, and you'll find the news that Martin and I talked about at the top of the show. And then you'll also find a link when you go to this radio show at our webpage to the Amazon page if for some reason you need help finding that. I'm sure you're all going to be fine on your own. But, yeah, and don't forget to continue to check our daily headlines because we post UFO headlines every day except for when I'm sick. And in those headlines, usually on Mondays, you'll see the story Cheryl posted on Friday. And that includes this Monday, which is today. You can go in the headlines, and I think the very first story is Cheryl's story for this week about flying saucers. So thank you to Cheryl for being on the show and for everything that she does. Be sure and follow her at Syracuse New Times and get her new desk reference. Also, thank you to Martin Willis for helping us at the beginning of the show with the UFO news. And don't forget what I mentioned at the top of the show, which is that Fife Symington interview that we posted last week. I think it was Monday of last week, the only day I was in the office. I was in the office Monday and Friday. But anyway, go check out that video. It's free on YouTube. You can find it at openminds.tv, or you can find it on our YouTube channel, which is Open Minds TV on YouTube. You could probably even just look up Fife Symington and find it on YouTube, since it's probably the latest video of Symington up there. But yeah, go check that out, and thank you so much. I cannot thank James Fox enough. First of all, I can't thank him for his excellent documentaries, Out of the Blue and I Know What I Saw. If you haven't seen those, go watch those. You can find those online now, too. You can find them on YouTube and all kinds of places. Many people would agree, and I hear this often, that those are the best UFO documentaries you can find out there. Pretty high praise. So go check those out. And thank you so much to James Fox for coming to the UFO Congress. He's a great speaker. He moderated a panel on the Phoenix Lights, and he did a talk of which we have up on the website. He brought witnesses from the Phoenix Lights who others haven't heard, or you probably haven't heard often, and they saw this thing go right overhead so that you can see their discussion with him. But that's up on our video on demand. So if you go to the video portal from openminds.tv. You'll find that. Also on our video on demand portal, we have the new Richard Dolan video up. So we just posted that like yesterday or something. So I haven't even really told people much about that. So I'll be sending some information out about that. So and as I've told you guys before, it's $5 a month for the video portal. We don't charge for this show. We don't charge for the news we post every day. We don't charge for practically nothing. So if you go to our video portal and subscribe, first of all, we're going to be very thankful. Second of all, it's going to help fund us and help us keep rolling. So that's always a good thing. Hopefully you enjoy what we do. And I do, and I enjoy that you enjoy it as well. And so I want you to keep going, and I want us to keep going. So please, that would be really great if you could subscribe to the video portal. And it's not like it's just a donation and you're not going to get nothing for it. In fact, you're going to have access to hundreds of videos from speakers like some of the people we've talked about. Got multiple Richard Dolan on there. We've got... Bob Lazar. Nobody else has got Bob Lazar. We got Bob Lazar on there. We've got several from George Knapp. We've got several from Charles Halt, who we talked about, the witness at the Rendlesham Forest. So, and many, many, many others. I'm just, some really good stuff. So go check it out. But enough selling stuff to you guys and more thanking you for all the cool stuff you do. But before I thank you, I'm going to thank someone else, Caleb Hanks, for the excellent music that he's provided for the open and close of the show. And now it's your turn. Thank you for patiently waiting, because I know you probably sit up on this part. And he's like, hey, they're going to thank us. He's going to thank me. He's going to talk about how great I am. Because I do like to talk about how great you guys are, because my listeners are everything when it comes to this show. And I do have some of the best listeners. Some of my favorite people in the UFO field are listeners to my show. How cool is that? Thank you guys so much for listening. And I apologize for missing last week, for being sick and stuff. Well, I shouldn't apologize for being sick. That's not like it's my fault. But... I don't know. That's what you do, right? You apologize when people get mad at you for not doing what you want them to do. And that appeases them. So I hope you're appeased by my apology. And I hope you enjoyed today's show.